Hello and welcome. Tonight, 27.5 trillion naira. That's the budget estimate presented by President Bola Tinubu to the National Assembly for the 2024 fiscal year. He says security, job creation and poverty reduction are to receive top priority. After laying out the budget, President Bola Tinubu departs for Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where he will deliver Nigeria's statement at the COP28 Climate Summit. And Supreme Court says old 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira notes remain legal tender until the federal government puts a process in place for its replacement.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's central bank affirms Supreme Court's judgment directs all branches to continue to issue and accept all denominations of the old and new naira notes as legal tender.
President Bola Tinubu has presented a budget proposal of 27.5 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly for the 2024 fiscal year. In his first budget presentation to the federal lawmakers since assuming office, President Tinubu identified three key areas: security, job creation, and poverty reduction as priority in the 2024 budget. The President also promised that efforts will be made to contain financial leakages through the effective implementation of key public financial management reforms.
The President makes his way into the chamber of the National Assembly amidst exchange of pleasantries with lawmakers who are already seated for a special joint session. It is President Bola Tinubu's first presentation of the appropriation bill to the National Assembly since he assumed office in May this year. President of the Senate as well as the Speaker of the House of Representatives welcome President Tinubu, who thereafter takes his seat as the President of the Senate opens the session with his remarks.
This is a significant milestone in our nation's journey toward progress and development. The presentation of the budgetary estimates sets the course for our nation's fiscal policies and priorities for the coming year.
President Tinubu begins his 2024 budget presentation tagged Budget of Renewed Hope by highlighting his policy focus, excluding the sectoral breakdown of allocation of the 27.5 trillion naira estimates.
Despite the global headwinds, the Nigerian economy has proven resilient, maintaining moderate but positive growth over the past 12 months. Inflation has trended upward, yes, due to the weak global conditions. To contain this rising domestic prices, we will ensure effective coordination of fiscal and monetary policy measures and collaborate with subnational governments to address structural factors driving in inflation in Nigeria. The budget proposal meets our goal of completing critical infrastructure projects, which will help address structural problems in the economy by lowering the cost of doing business for companies and the cost of living for average person.
If the aspiration of the $1 trillion GDP economy in less than 10 years is to be achieved, the President believes the fundamentals and security should be fixed.
Defense and internal security are recorded top priority. The internal security architecture will be overhauled to enhance law enforcement capabilities and safeguard lives, property, and investment across the country. Human capital is the most critical resource of national development. Accordingly, the budget prioritizes human development with particular attention to children, the foundation of our nation.
The fiscal policy estimates, according to the President, will leverage on innovation, collaboration, and more.
A critical focus of this budget And the medium-term expenditure framework is Nigeria's commitment to greener future, emphasizing public-private partnership. We have strategically made provision to leverage private capital for big-ticket infrastructure projects in energy, transportation, and other sectors.
He then lays the appropriation bill before the legislators. The Speaker of the House of Representatives commends the audacious policy posture of the President and promises him of legislative support.
The National Assembly will support the government policies and programs targeted at alleviating poverty, economic restructuring and diversification, as well as social sector reform and developments.
The 2024 appropriation bill, as presented by President Tinubu, highlights key economic assumptions that will guide the 2024 fiscal year in line with his renewed hope agenda to meet the yearnings of Nigerians.
Shortly after the presentation of the 2024 budget proposal, the National Assembly began work immediately with a vow to plug all loopholes and curb leakages. In separate reactions, the lawmakers acknowledged the enormous work ahead in order to ensure that the budget is passed before the end of the year. Our National Assembly correspondent, Gloria Umezuke, reports.
President Bola Tinubu's 2024 budget proposal struck a responsive chord for many of these legislators at the joint session, who believe there is a huge chance for success, particularly with a planned economic growth of 3.76%. Although the lawmakers have barely a month to conclude the budget defense process, they show a determination to double down on the scrutiny of the budget.
And that is the reason why we've called MDAs and scrutinized their performances in the 2023 so that we can see how the 2024 projection can be attained. There are a lot of leakages, and we're working on how we can block those leakages. And amendment that we need to do on the Fiscal Responsibility Act, we're going to do it in order to enhance and bring sanction to those MDAs that pilfer into the revenue generated.
Reactions began pouring in on the president's call for expedited action on the 2024 proposal.
I don't think it's about the amount of time, it's about how we use the time. We have a constitutional duty to go line by line, issues by issue, and ensure that the numbers, agrees with the shared microeconomic objective.
The proposal is bold and courageous. I think that the legislature will have little or not too much work to do. The budget will act as a stimulus package to address the current poverty line that Nigeria has fallen into, and once again recover our economy and fertilize it for even growth.
The MDAs must be on their toes. They must be ready to come for the budget defense 24/7.
The last time when we had to screen ministers, we had to suspend our recess in order to do it, and we worked till 11 at night some days. It might have to be the same thing again this time, but because really the time is short.
There are various reactions to the federal government's borrowing pattern and the Senate president's request for a reduction of the nation's debt profile.
Above all, Africa is a very fair budget, except that we have to look at the area of funding, the area of borrowing, because now we are borrowing 8.7 trillion naira, which is about $8.9 billion. So obviously speaking, I think that's not too much of borrowing for 250 million people.
What we need is more transparency. We need to know where the money has gone to and what is being used for.
Shortly after the joint session, the Senate convened in a closed door where a resolution was taken to continue with plenary for the next 2 days only, after which it will close to resume on the 12th of December. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, says in order to stabilize the Nigerian economy for rapid inclusive growth, there is going to be less reliance on borrowing. Mr. Edun stated this during the breakdown of the 2024 budget proposal by the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Mr. Abubakar Bagudu, in Abuja. He adds that the budget deficit has been brought down from 6.1% of gross domestic product to about 3.88%. Our correspondent Benny Ark reports.
Few hours after President Bola Tinubu presented his first budget estimates to the National Assembly, the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning gives a breakdown of the proposals. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, give more insights on the assumptions in the budget and explains why the federal government wants to reduce borrowing.
In order to stabilize the Nigerian economy for rapid inclusive growth, there is going to be less reliance on borrowing. The budget deficit is being brought down from about 6.1% of GDP to 3.88% of GDP. That's a huge change in direction from unlimited and limitless borrowing to focusing on revenue, expenditure management, to give value for money with expenditure and to raise revenue.
The Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Mr. Atiku Bagudu, presents the sectoral breakdown of the budget. According to the Minister, defense and security, education, health, infrastructure and social development and poverty reduction are the top 5 allocations. The debt servicing is expected to go up 9.18 trillion naira. The minister explains that the budget is designed to address fiscal challenges and improve domestic economic situations.
The budget that was presented today to the National Assembly, and I believe was well received by the National Assembly and Nigerians, has been prepared against the backdrop of continuing global and domestic challenges. Overall fiscal risks have increased following weaker than expected domestic economy performance and structural issues in the domestic economy.
A review of the 2023 budget reveals that only 25% of the capital budget has been released as of September 2023. Mr. Ben Akabweze gives further insight into the plans of the new administration.
This is a transition year. We're transiting from one president to another. The last time we had a transition year like that was 2015. In 2015, the budget was not presented until actually mid-December. So 1 month later than we are doing even now.
The administration is hoping that the budget will meet the expectations of Nigerians and improve the nation's gross domestic product. Benny Ark, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, with the presentation of the 2024 budget proposal out of the way, the president departed Abuja, the nation's capital, for Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where he will be attending the COP28 Climate Summit, also known as the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, or Conference of the Parties of the COP28. President Bola Tinubu is expected to deliver a national statement at the World Leaders Summit, which takes place on December the 1st and 2nd this year. The president's statement will highlight Nigeria's stance on various issues, including renewable energy and climate financing, mindful of the severe impact of climate change on Nigeria. His message will also focus on holding businesses and institutions accountable, reflecting Nigeria's dedication to sustainable and responsible practices. Other issues to be explored by the Nigerian team include partnerships to implement Nigeria's energy transition, Article 6 projects, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, technology transfer, capacity building, and methane mitigation. In part 2, after the break, we will get more insight on the 2024 budget proposal from legal practitioner and lead director of the Center for Social Justice, Mr. Eze Onyefere. Please join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the News at 10 coming to you live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. 27.5 trillion naira. That's the budget estimate presented by President Bola Tinubu to the National Assembly for the 2024 fiscal year. He says security, job creation, and poverty reduction are to receive top priority. After laying out the budget, President Bola Tinubu departs for Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where he will deliver Nigeria's statement at the COP28 Climate Summit. Supreme Court says old 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes remain legal tender until the federal government puts a process in place for its replacement. And Israel says it will consider every serious proposal to extend the truce after a 6-day pause in fighting. So let's now get some more insight into the 2024 budget proposal by the President today. And we're now being joined by the Lead Director of Center for Social Justice, Mr. Eze Onyekpere. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
My pleasure.
All right, so first, let me ask you for your impression of the budget proposal that was done today by the President in terms of its size and components. What's your reaction?
I'm not usually excited by the figures that are put out on the first day of the budget because some of the figures may not be realistic. It's only when you get into the implementation stage and you have the full details that you can now make the correct call. First of all, we are looking at a revenue profile of about 18 trillion before we start talking of funding the deficit. And from previous experience over the years, we've hardly made up to 10 trillion as actual revenue. So it will be more or less some form of magic or miracle of how that 18 trillion is going to come. And then we have a 45% of the expected revenue going to be used to pay back debts. And of course, if you don't get that 18 trillion, the percentage of debt service to actual revenue, of course, will also keep increasing. So overall, it's just the usual routine, but the details is what matters in terms of whether they're realistic. For instance, if you look at the budget breakdown done by the Honorable Minister, you find a troubling situation where for 2023, despite the figures of about 23 trillion, only 25% capital expenditure has been released. And so doing that and getting into the last quarter, at most for 2023, we may not get up to or more than 35 to 40% capital expenditure release. But at the beginning of the year, we were celebrating, oh, we have such a huge budget. So the implementation and, of course, how realistic the figures are is what will determine the way forward.
All right, so the President has identified 3 main areas of priority in the budget for 2024. We're talking about security, job creation, and, of course, poverty reduction. How do you expect these areas to impact on the overall economy?
Well, if insecurity can be reduced, farmers going back to the farms and producing, of course, that will touch on food inflation. And of course, it will also improve the ease of doing business in Nigeria, and a lot of other stakeholders will become more productive. And then you talk about poverty reduction. Poverty reduction cannot stand on its own. It's a product of activities and interventions in a lot of sectors. So by the time you talk about interventions in education, health, and then creating more jobs through industrialization, improving the megawatts of electricity coming from the power sector, then you can begin to talk of poverty reduction and creating new jobs. So it's not just something that stands alone. But the fear I have is that the projections for revenue that will be able to help us realize this are overtly ambitious.
The budget assumptions, exchange rate of 750 naira to the US dollar, talking about a production of 1.78 million barrels of crude per day and an oil benchmark of $77.96 per barrel. How feasible are these assumptions, I mean, given what we have seen since the administration came on board?
Well, 1.78 million barrels a day is realistic if government can curb oil theft. And of course, prevent pipeline vandalization. And also, NNPC can begin to up the investments in the sector. If you recall, as at 2015, we were doing about 2.1 million barrels. Indeed, I had expected the current administration to have a target of about 2.5 million barrels to see how we can up the ante. Because once we're able to do that, we have more resources for the three tiers of government to share at the federation account, and we will have more foreign exchange to defend the value of the naira. So even if we cannot do it immediately, I hope that before the end of 2024 and mid-2025, we will be able to move beyond 2 million barrels a day. 750 to the dollar looks realistic if we can continue the course of reforms and make sure we get more foreign exchange to defend the naira. But then what I find a little bit unrealistic is things like maybe inflation rate of 21% or thereabout. I do not see the magic that will be performed between now and next year for us to be able to get that, unless it's just an aspiration for us to work with. But if you look at the way things are going, inflation may also likely increase beyond what we have now.
All right, and finally, the deficit for next year, we understand, is put at 9.18 trillion naira. That's representing 3.88% of the nation's GDP. That's a drop from a deficit of 6.11% in the 2023 budget. Is that something we should be cheered about or cheering ourselves about?
Well, the deficits, the figures you have now is dependent or will be dependent on how much revenue we raise. If we raise as much revenue as we project, then the deficit can stay there. But if the revenue underperforms, what will likely happen is that we are going to borrow more. So like I said, it's a question of whether the revenue we're expecting will come. If it doesn't come, we are likely going to borrow more than the 9 trillion that is projected.
Mr. Eze Onyekpere, the lead director of Center for Social Justice, thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your thoughts on the news at 10.
My pleasure.
To legal matters, the Supreme Court has ordered that the old 200, 500, and 1,000 naira notes should continue to coexist with the new notes as they remain legal tender until the federal government puts a process in place for its replacement or redesign after due consultation with relevant stakeholders. The 7-man panel, led by Justice Inyango Koro, gave the ruling following an application by the federal government asking the court to grant an extension of time for old naira notes to remain in circulation as legal tender.
It's important for us to know that today, with this ruling, the Supreme Court has confirmed that it's not just the final court, but a policy court. The court has reviewed its judgment and has now allowed the federal government to allow the old and new notes to go on pari passu until the federal government puts a process in place for its replacement or redesign after due consultation with all the relevant stakeholders. So the Supreme Court again has come to rescue Nigerians from avoidable economic hardship. And the economy. To the extent that the federal government is now enjoined to come up with policies after due consultation with all the relevant stakeholders.
To security now, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja, says some states in the country, like Niger and Kaduna, that were volatile are now very stable. The Army Chief was speaking while on an operational tour to the 4 Special Forces Command military cantonment in Doma local government area of Nasarawa State. He adds that the military is working to refine its operations and to cater for the welfare of troops as it is committed to tackling insurgency.
We keep the record and we review our operations in our operations center, and we have a department that is in charge of that. And from the records available, Niger State has been stable. Niger State used to be very volatile. But for some months now, Niger State has been quite stable. Since the military had that mishap in August, Niger State has been very stable. Kaduna has been very stable. People drive at night along the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway. Zamfara, I've been reading a lot in the social and the mainstream media. The army does not get itself involved in politics, but we take every opinion into consideration in refining our operation and the conduct of these operations in the field.
Airstrikes against oil thieves continue in South Nigeria as the Nigerian Air Force under Operation Delta Safe destroyed 2 Cotonou boats sighted at Arugbana near Okrika in River State, as well as an illegal refining site at Yellow Island, also in River State. A statement from the Air Force Media Office says subsequent reconnaissance flights over Cawthorne Channel, Billy Dariama, Okrika, Bonny Island and Idama revealed an assemblage of destroyed and abandoned illegal refineries destroyed by the air component of Operation Delta Safe. The statement adds that the operation will continue until the activities of the saboteurs are completely halted or reduced to the barest. Still to come on the news at 10, the Central Bank of Nigeria directs all its branches to continue to accept the old and new Naira notes from deposit money banks in compliance with the Supreme Court judgment. That's on Business News. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Let's now head to the nation's capital, where Gloria Umezuke is standing by to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Take it away, Gloria.
Thank you, Ayo. Here, one person has been confirmed killed in fresh protests that rocked Kano State over an appeal court verdict sacking Governor Abba Yusuf of the New Nigeria People's Party. The protest is the 4th since the appeal court sacked the governor on November 17, 2023, and declared the All Progressives Congress candidate, Mr. Nasiru Ganuwa, as the winner of the March poll. Our correspondent, Sadiq Eliasu, reports.
Tension continues to rise in Kano State following the appeal court judgment that sacked Governor Abba Yusuf. Wednesday morning witnessed 2 protests in the state. At the Ofar Nasarawa, protesters gather under the flyover on the major road in the city, protesting the appeal court judgment.
We are Nigerian citizens and we have the right to do the protest. So we are not stopping anybody from doing anything. We are here to show our anger that the judiciary is now zero.
We are here at Kurna Masallachi. This road you are seeing here leads to Katsina State. Protesters have blocked the road since morning. They are claiming that police have shot 3 of their people.
These protesters are demanding justice after police allegedly shot 3 people in Kurna area of the state.
We are protesting because the police came yesterday and shot 3 people, and now one of them is dead. What happened was that yesterday some hoodlums fought each other. And after they left, the police came and one of them began shooting people for no reason.
The police has announced the arrest of 1 inspector who is suspected to be the shooter and warned against street protests.
Investigation has already commenced on this. Area Commander Dala is being directed to fish out if any of the policemen could be identified as the one that fired the shot and who gave him that instruction to fire. Already 1 police inspector has been arrested.
The police have taken over major entrances in the state to forestall any breakdown of law and order. Sadiq Ilyasu, Channels Television News.
Staying with the fallout of the appeal court's judgment on the Kano governorship election, the New Nigeria People's Party is asking President Bola Tinubu, world leaders and former Nigerian presidents to counsel the Supreme Court to embrace substantial justice with respect to the Kano state governorship election. At a peaceful protest held at the main gate of the ECOWAS Commission in Abuja, the acting national chairman of the party, Mr. Abba Ali, says the verdict of the appeal court, which nullified the election of Mr. Abba Yusuf as the governor of Kano State is a miscarriage of justice. The NNPP chairman explains that the verdict of the appeal court is a deliberate attempt by some persons to overturn the popular will of the people of Kano State for the second time, having suffered a similar fate in 2019.
It's common knowledge that in 2023, with a few months to the election, the Kwankwasia political movement and the national movement, TNM, joined the new Nigeria People's Party, a relatively unknown party, without strong structures whatsoever, and were able to win Kano State governorship election resoundingly in a free and fair election, as they did in 2019 on the platform of the PDP. Sadly, the tribunal and the appeal courts have both recently obtained the overwhelming victory in two separate contentious judgments, which many legal luminaries have described as strange to the laws of the land, ignoring substantial justice, and in effect, snatching from the NNPP and the good people of Kano State a mandate freely given to their candidate, Engineer Abba Kabir Yusuf. As Almighty God will have it, the CTC of the appeal court judgment is at variance with the judgment read by the three-man panel of the courts, clearly showing that the judgment was in our favor. As a party, we are not taking this development lightly and will do anything within the ambit of the law to take what the entire world knows is ours.
Nigeria's premier public speaking, training and coaching institution for executives, leaders, professionals and office holders, the School of Eloquence, has hosted the 5th series of the annual Eloquence Cup competition, designed as part of its Catching Them Young initiative for public secondary schools in Nigeria. The competition, organized by the School of Eloquence, Lagos, featured speakers from 9 government-owned secondary schools. There was also the individual prize category.
It's a test of persuasive communication and oratory among these young secondary school students. This initiative by the School of Eloquence Lagos is testing the mastery of effective public speaking and confidence level from early stages.
Come and show us how capable you are in speaking. This event is not a debate. This is not a debate. This is not a quiz. This is an exercise in oratory, because each of you will come up here, stand for at least 5 to 7 minutes and speak to what? What is the topic? Drug abuse.
Drug abuse and its impact on the youth is the topic, and these students are expected to deliver a clear, coherent and persuasive message to the audience.
The rate at which they value their education is below the rate at which they're greatly influenced by drug abuse.
Why do people still abuse drugs, though they know the repercussions of their actions?
Because of the socioeconomic problems, poverty, unemployment, they just resort to drugs and that sort.
Young people of nowadays who are persistently abusing drugs are more likely to have an array of problems, some of which are caused by drug abuse.
A member of the board of the School of Eloquence, Mr. Oluseyi Shoemimo, commends the school for the initiative in nurturing the students.
Don't listen to the young ones today. I know somehow that I missed out on something. I didn't have someone like Ubong around to have tutored me and made me even a better person.
At the end of the keenly contested public speaking face-off, Dairy Farm Secondary School Agege Lagos won the Senior Secondary School's Ultimate Public Speaking Contest, displacing the defending champion, CMS Grammar School.
After school, we always wait every closing for the preparation for this. Even our teacher, he did a very great job for us just to get this. So we are very happy to have this.
Now, what can we do as a responsible entity within the society? We decided to cascade that knowledge, take that knowledge to schools, because public speaking is not taught as part of secondary school education. It's not in the curriculum.
The School of Eloquence said it remains committed to mainstreaming the learning of practical speaking skills among professionals, political leaders, celebrities, and entrepreneurs.
Well, that's it from the nation's capital. We go over now to Melinda in Lagos for business news.
Many thanks, Gloria. Welcome to Business News. The Central Bank of Nigeria has directed all its branches to continue issuing and accepting all denominations of the old and new Naira notes in the country. In a statement released today, the financial market regulator says the move is in compliance with the order of the Supreme Court, granting the prayers of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation to extend the use of the old banknotes beyond the December 31st deadline. At the same time, the CBN has asked the public to continue accepting both versions of the Naira notes for their daily transactions, while embracing other alternative mode of payment to reduce pressure on cash circulation. The Financial Reporting Council says it is set to release a new strategy for corporate governance to ensure maximum compliance for Nigeria's public and private sector. The FRC Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Rabi Olowu, who made this known at an engagement and media roundtable, explained that a new public sector code will be unveiled in the first quarter of next year as the agency undergoes transformation.
Thank you very much. For the FRC, it's a new chapter. Like I said, we've seen concerning evidence everywhere in businesses and also in public institutions. The reason why we need to really up our game, when it comes to financial reporting and corporate governance. And that's why, as the apex regulatory body that is mandated to actually look at this area, we also need to coordinate ourselves and come up with clear strategies. And those strategies are in four folds. We talked about digitization, we talked about operational excellence, we talked about stakeholder engagement, and we talked about enforcement. Enforcement is going to be key in the things that we will do very, very loudly going forward. We want to make sure that we hold to account those who are responsible for delivering the standards and the codes that we have set.
More than 132 billion naira has been recovered at the close of the midweek trading session as the market bounces back from the previous loss. Laddie Williams has details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Still in the final trading week of November, and the market is back in positive territory after profit-taking yesterday, 71,284 to close from a range of about 71,006 to 71,360. Managed to settle there, up 0.34%. Let's look at the sectoral performance now. So I'm used to the oil and gas counter being unchanged, but today we see a big move there, 6.06%. Consumer goods, that's also up 0.89%. Banking, with all the figures down, we're seeing a big dump there for the banking counter. And the major mover of the oil and gas counter today, Seplat, they're adding 210 naira to its share price. Maybe it's that news about Seplat being on the verge of concluding a $1.3 billion ExxonMobil asset purchase. Maybe investors are reacting to that. And with a market cap of 1.36 trillion naira, once one of the stocks worth over 1 trillion naira moves, we know the market shakes. Well, we see Guinea Insurance there topping the losers counter, 27 kobo down 10%. Well, today, President Bola Tinubu presented his first budget presentation to the House, and definitely we're expecting investors are going to be reacting to that in the subsequent trading days of the week. That's it from me on the Stock Market Report. I'm Laddie Williams.
That's Business News. It's back to you, Ayotunde.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Melinda. Israel says it has carried out a raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank and killed 2 senior terrorists. The Palestinian Authority say 2 children were also killed by Israeli gunfire in Jenin, but the IDF has not commented on the incident. The fresh violence comes on the 6th day of a truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, with Israel saying it's received a list of hostages set to be released today. Here's Simon Puzi with other international stories in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Israel will consider every serious proposal to extend the truce, a government spokesman said after a 6-day pause in fighting.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Elon Levy said Israel was committed to returning all 161 hostages home. He added that chilling new details about life as Hamas hostages have emerged following the releases, and shared testimony from the father of Emily Hand, who spent her 9th birthday as a hostage in Gaza.
As the survivors of Hamas captivity return home over the last week, we're beginning to discover new chilling details about life as Hamas hostages. I'm of course not at liberty to share information from the official investigations, but the evidence that the families have been sharing with the media is chilling. The hostages were not held in reasonable, as some have cynically claimed. Our children were serially abused. The testimonies are harrowing. Little Emily Hand's father, Thomas, has movingly told media that she only speaks in whispers because she was conditioned not to make a noise. He sees the terror in her eyes. She thought that she had been held hostage for a whole year.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health is reporting that 2 children have been killed by what it says was Israeli army gunfire in the city of Jenin in the West Bank. Footage showed Israeli military vehicles maneuvering through the streets while gunshots were heard in the background. The Israeli army has been carrying out a wide-scale military operation there, which began on Tuesday evening. The pause in fighting has allowed aid agencies to take advantage of the current truce to deliver food and water to Palestinians. Here, the UN relief agency UNRWA handing out bags of flour and fresh water in Khan Yunis in the south of the territory. There are about 1.7 million internally displaced Gazans, many of whom moved to the south of Gaza away from the most intense fighting. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has reaffirmed the United States and NATO's continued support for helping Ukraine in the face of ongoing Russian aggression. After a NATO-Ukraine meeting in Brussels, Mr. Blinken said the message of an enduring commitment to Ukraine was clear from every single country around the table. Kuleba added that there was a clear no to fatigue and a clear yes to continued and increased support for Ukraine.
It's striking to see this spirit and of unity in the room on these 2 issues.
The relationship, the partnership between NATO and Ukraine is also vitally important. We reaffirmed the commitments made at Vilnius that Ukraine will become a member of NATO when allies agree and conditions are met. But we also focused intensely on the practical work that is being done and will continue to be done as we head to the Washington summit next year on continuing to strengthen Ukraine's capacity.
A US military aircraft with 6 people on board has crashed off Yukushima Island in southwestern Japan. Japan's chief cabinet secretary, Hirokazu Matsuno, broke the news during a regular news conference, adding that 7 people had been injured. Japan's Coast Guard said 1 person had been found dead near the crash site. The CV-22 Osprey hybrid plane had been heading from Iwakuni Base in the western Yamaguchi Prefecture to Kadena Base in the country's southwestern Okinawa region. A Turkish-flagged tanker has run aground off the coast of Istanbul due to stormy weather. That's according to Turkey's maritime authority. All of the 11 crew personnel were evacuated from the ship, which ran aground around 1 a.m. local time on Wednesday. Wind speeds were around 50 kilometers per hour near Istanbul around that time, according to the Turkish State Meteorological Service. And Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral's reconstruction efforts have entered a new stage as work begun on its new spire. Workers on high scaffolding could be seen installing the new spire's framework on Wednesday. The iconic structure had collapsed in 2019 during the blaze that ravaged one of France's most visited landmarks. The spire's new iteration, made of oak, is designed to be an identical copy of the previous one, and its framework should be finished by late December. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. And I'm from our sports center. We're hearing the required motivation to spur victory from the standing captain of the Super Falcons, Rasheedat Ajibade, who is assuring the nation that the team will bring its A game as they face Cape Verde in the qualifiers for the Women Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers in Morocco next year. Nigeria will face Cape Verde in the first leg of the final qualifiers on Thursday in Abuja by 4 p.m. And Rasheedat believes there won't be excuses.
Yeah, we just know that we know what is at stake. We want to go to the Nations Cup. We don't want any excuses. Of course, there are a lot of things that could be an excuse, but we have to leave everything aside and we have to focus on what is more important, which is taking care of ourselves, giving our 100% and, staying competitive and, talking to each other as a team, before the games and, giving in, advising each other what our input is going to be individually on that team, be it on the bench, be it starting, and so everybody has an input. So we most of the time, speak to each other, and most of the time we push ourselves beyond the limit on the field just to make sure that, when we get to the game the next day, we are giving everything on that field, and I want to come out, on that field knowing too well that we've done our best.
Meanwhile, in the Nigeria Women Football League, Premier League rather, Niger Rattles recorded their first win of the season on match day 3 with a 2-1 win over Adamawa in Abuja. We can see here on the screen that Abia Angels were not able to secure maximum point as Heartland were able to get that maximum point on the way. Niger Rattles, as I said before, got that maximum point against Adamawa Queens. Confluence Queens also headed out with a maximum point at the end of stoppage time, beating Royal Queens. And Dana's Ladies had to go goalless, 0-0 rather, on that particular encounter. We have Delta Queens 2-0 against Rivers Angels and Remo Star Ladies 1-1 against Bayelsa Queens. Edo Queens were able to get a maximum point on the way, and FC Robo and Ekiti Queens just had to manage that goalless draw. Let's move on to other stories now. In Europe, Manchester United are on the brink of elimination from the Champions League after blowing a 2-goal lead to draw 3-3 at Galatasaray. A point leaves the Red Devils still bottom of Group A and needing to beat Bayern Munich in their final match at Old Trafford to have any chance of qualifying. In the meantime, UEFA has removed the VAR official at the center of the controversial penalty award in PSG's 1-1 Champions League draw with Newcastle United from duty. Thomas Kwiatkowski was due to be a VAR assistant referee at the match between Real Sociedad and Red Bull Salzburg in Spain, and his replacement comes after Kylian Mbappe scored a penalty 8 minutes into injury time to earn the PSG a point against Newcastle, a result that deprived the English side of a famous victory and leaves them on the brink of a group stage exit. And that's it on sports. It's back to you, Ayotunde.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. And the main news again. President Bola Tinubu today presented the sum of 27.5 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly as appropriation bill for the year 2024. He said security, job creation, and poverty reduction will be given priority. President Bola Tinubu has left the country for Dubai in the United Arab Emirates to join other world leaders for the COP28 Climate Summit. Also today, the Supreme Court ordered that the old 200, 500, and 1,000 naira notes remain legal tender in the country until the federal government puts a process in place for its replacement. And Israel has said it will consider every serious proposal to extend the truce after a 6-day pause in fighting. That's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for watching. I'm Ayotunde Balogun, and do have a good night.